You may remember a TV show from a few years ago called Big Brother, where people were locked away inside a house over a few months in summer. Every single area of the house was covered by cameras and microphones so that each housemate was monitored at all times. It was built as a social experiment to see how people reacted when they were confined to a small space with absolutely no access to the outside world. One of the most noticeable effects of being cooped up in this small compound, something which repeated itself in every season of the show, was that the housemates very quickly lost their sense of perspective on life. When the total extent of their world was reduced to 4 walls, the small things within those walls suddenly seemed like big issues. They began getting into furious fights over a missing piece of fruit from the fruit bowl, or a lost sock. Little gestures and stray words became magnified and blown out of all proportion. The boredom of an unoccupied mind meant they had nothing to do but gossip about other housemates and stew on conversations and arguments. Resentment simmered and then often overflowed. They created drama and tensions where there naturally should be none. And of course, this is what the producers of the show wanted because it made for explosive television. Every Friday night, one of the housemates would be voted out, and immediately after coming back into the outside world, they would sit down for an interview with the host and be shown footage from their time in the house. As they watched themselves back on screen, they would shake their heads sheepishly and cringe at their behaviour, embarrassed that they had ever got so worked up about minute and insignificant things. They would protest that they didn't recognise the person on screen. It was as though they had been woken from a dream or snapped out of some state of hypnosis and could suddenly see just how bizarrely petty and silly their disputes had been. Being back in the real world, even just for a few minutes, had suddenly put all those tiny issues back into perspective. The minute that they stepped outside of their compound, the screaming crowds reminded them that other people existed out with those in their little group. They were suddenly made aware of a great big wide world again, a world in which grand themes had been taking place while they had been locked away, a world where wars had begun, where people had died, where new lives had begun, where terrorists had struck, where tsunamis and earthquakes had ravaged nations, where economic crises had robbed people of their livelihoods and homes. Events of huge national and international significance had taken place, things they hadn't heard about because all the while they'd been shut up in a compound bickering about a missing banana or a pair of socks. How insignificant in the larger scheme of things that now seemed. How trivial. No wonder they felt so sheepish when they watched their behaviour back in that context. Now, a similar thing can happen in church. When we lock ourselves away inside 4 walls and make church insular and small, we can lose perspective, and that leads to arguments over things that are actually quite trivial. I talked little about this in Stay Free. We get into arguments about flower arrangements, or bicker about how loud the drums were, or whether it was right that one of the elders wasn't wearing a tie on Sunday. We argue endlessly about minor theological doctrines to no use or advantage other than to be proved right. We gossip about a guy because he raised his hands when he was singing, or whisper about that lady in the 4th row that wore an unusual hat. We can often become self-righteous prigs, overly fussy and totally preoccupied with trivialities that really don't matter in the grand scheme of things. This kind of behaviour is repellent, and like the Big Brother contestants, I wonder what we'll do if we reach heaven and God shows us back a video of our lives. If we will suddenly come to our senses and feel embarrassed about all of these petty squabbles. If we will shake our heads and cringe at our behaviour like they do, because in making our world small, we lost perspective and spent our lives making mountains out of molehills. It's not as though there aren't grand themes to be getting on with. It's not as though there isn't a great wide world out there to engage with. It is estimated that 150,000 people die each day in the world, and most of them don't know Jesus. That's perhaps one person every second of every day being lost for all eternity. Jesus gave us the Great Commission to rescue them with the gospel. Us, you, me. There's no bigger theme than this. There is no bigger mission than this. It encompasses the entire planet, all peoples in all the towns and cities and villages of the world, and all the jungles and desert places of the world, in all nations, on every continent. Go, tell, proclaim, heal, cast out demons, confront evil, oppose tyranny, seek justice, help the oppressed, free captives, change the face of the world, alter eternities. Wow, we have no excuses for making our world small. We have so much work to do. If we accept this massive challenge that Jesus has given us, broaden our horizons and work together in the world for the sake of God's kingdom, we will soon find the idle gossiping and ugly petty bickering that may characterize church life today coming to an end. We may discover that all the little divisive things that may seem so important right now are put into proper perspective. Instead, as we tackle the big issues of life, I believe that we will develop an astonishing strength of unity. Look at soldiers. Outside of the family unit, there is perhaps no company of people amongst whom you will find a greater sense of brotherhood, unity, and belonging than soldiers. This develops because as they go out from the relative safety of their base camp into the war zone, they know that they are surrounded by hostile enemies and the only people that they can really trust are the other members of their squad. More than that, they absolutely must trust the other members of their squad. They have a mission to complete, and it is only achievable if they work together and stick together. They cannot do it alone. Their very lives are on the line every second of every minute of every hour of every day, and they simply need one another just to stay alive. The guy at the front of the platoon can only keep his eyes on what's ahead, and he needs to trust that his teammate on rear guard is alert to any danger from behind. If he's not switched on, there's a good chance he won't be going home alive. Likewise, the guy driving the tank has to hope that the gunners can shoot properly, and the gunners have to trust that the driver won't steer them off a cliff or into an ambush. Each of their lives are in the other's hands. They are each other's eyes and ears. They almost operate as a single organism composed of many interdependent parts, and they are all of one mind and focused on one mission. This interdependence on one another as they face down the enemy and overcome perilous situations creates an unparalleled sense of togetherness. They are a band of brothers. We should find that same sense of unity in the church, and for much the same reasons. If the church left its base camp and went out into a hostile world, focused on its Great Commission, attacking the pagan godlessness, sinfulness, materialism, greed, injustice, occultism, and demonic power, and faced the persecution, scorn, hatred, and retaliation that would inevitably come its way, they would find that they need to rely on one another to complete their mission, and perhaps just to survive. They would need to operate as one unit, one heart and one mind, in order to meet their objectives. Paul wrote to the Philippians saying, "Whether I come and see you again or only hear about you, I will know that you are standing together with one spirit and one purpose, fighting together for the faith, which is the good news." That should be a picture of the church today, standing together, working together, fighting together in aid of a common cause. So united should the church be that Paul even described the church as a single body made up of many parts, saying that each part of the body needs to work with the other parts just to get the job done. We should really be like one organism. We must be each other's eyes and ears and hands and feet. And just as the human body develops muscles by work and resistance, so will the body of Christ. If you sit on the sofa and give your body no work, it becomes flabby and weak. But if you get to the gym and give it some resistance, it develops muscles. The body of Christ is the same. This is why the church historically thrives in the face of persecution. It gets stronger as it faces challenges. Therefore, the church needs to set achievable objectives, real objectives in the real world, and then it needs to be trained and equipped by discipleship to meet those objectives and to work together in unity towards those objectives. What are the problems and opportunities that exist within your local community? Identify them and then train and send out groups to tackle them. Not only will the church then become more productive, but it will also become stronger by the effort, more winsome to the world, and more unified in the process. Our individual and collective sanctification will increase rapidly as we leave our comfort zones and disciple and minister to others.